Greetings, parasite ecologists. Now that we've learned some of the basics of the apicomplexan Plasmodium, let's talk about its life cycle. We'll cover the life cycle of the malaria parasites in depth as an example for the other coccidia and the other protozoa, which all have their own special variations on this theme. Let's begin by defining some terms that you'll need to understand the Plasmodium life cycle. The first is gamogony. Gamogony is, as the name suggests, the process by which a Plasmodium parasite produces gametes. This is the part of the cycle of sexual reproduction. Just like many of the metazoan parasites like trematodes and cestodes, Plasmodium and other protozoa go through sexual and asexual parts of their life cycle. Gamogony is the sexual part of the Plasmodium life cycle. But they also undergo sprorogony, an asexual stage of reproduction when Plasmodium can produce sporozoites. And this is the life stage of the Plasmodium parasite that is present in the host mosquito and can be passed on to a human host. In other words, the sporozoite is the life stage that is infectious to people. But things get even more complicated because Plasmodium also has another asexual stage called schizogony. And this process produces merozoites, which are the stage that circulates in the human host and the stage that causes the symptoms of malaria in the human host, as we'll see in the next video. Gamogony is important for the parasite because it's their opportunity for sexual reproduction, which gives them the chance to mix up their genes with the genes of a partner. And that produces lots of good genetic diversity to ensure that at least some of their babies are going to make it, no matter what kind of environment they face in the future. Sporogony is important because this is the process that makes the infectious stage for people, allowing the parasite to spread to new hosts. And schizogony is important because this is the stage that allows the parasite to replicate in the vertebrate host. And the more merozoites it produces, the more opportunity there is for the parasite to infect any mosquitoes that bite the vertebrate host. So let's get down to the life cycle. We'll start at the bottom of this diagram where this mosquito is biting a human host. The mosquito's salivary glands are loaded with sporozoites, which are produced during the stage of sporogony and can infect people. The mosquito is feeding on this human, and in the process, it injects some of these sporozoites, which make their way through the human body and find their way to the liver. There, they do an initial stage of asexual schizogony called the exoerythrocytic stage. And it's called exoerythrocytic because it's not in red blood cells, otherwise known as erythrocytes. It's in the liver. All malaria parasites go through this initial asexual reproductive stage in the liver first before moving on to the blood. After that initial asexual reproductive stage in the liver, these guys have produced mature liver schizons through schizogony, which then burst open, releasing little merozoites. And those merozoites go out into the bloodstream and find red blood cells or erythrocytes to infect. Then they can go through one of two different pathways. They can continue cycles of erythrocytic schizogony done within the red blood cells over and over again, where they infect a red blood cell, turn into trophozoites inside of that red blood cell. Then the trophozoites replicate through schizogony into merozoites, and then eventually the red blood cell bursts, releasing all these new baby merozoites to infect red blood cells of their very own. But alternatively, these merozoites can infect a red blood cell and then develop into gametocytes through gamogony. They're sometimes called macrogametocytes and microgametocytes. The microgametocyte is the male sexual stage, and the macrogametocyte is the female sexual stage. They can also be called gametes. These gametes are now ready to be picked up by a mosquito, and this is the stage that is infectious to a mosquito. A mosquito ingests those gametes or gametocytes during its blood meal, and hopefully it gets both a male and a female. When it does, those gametocytes emerge from the red blood cells in the mosquito gut, and they merge to form a zygote. That zygote then transforms into an ookinete. The ookinete is mobile, and it passes through the wall of the mosquito's gut and forms an oocyst. In that oocyst, which lays in the body cavity of the mosquito, sporozoites develop. The sporozoites then burst out of their oocyst and make their way to the salivary glands of the mosquito, where they're ready to be injected into another human or other vertebrate host. So, That's the malaria life cycle, but it's complicated. So let's go through it one more time using a different set of diagrams. By going through the life cycle twice, I want you to really get a sense for how it works. So again, let's start with the mosquito feeding on a human and injecting sporozoites into that human. Those sporozoites pass through the proboscis of the mosquito and into the human body. They get into the bloodstream, they find their way to the liver. Once they're there in the liver, they can infect a hepatic cell, and inside the hepatic cell, they form a liver schizont. And these schizonts incubate little baby merozoites that can be released into the bloodstream. Now, there's an alternative pathway here that isn't shown in this life cycle diagram, but I want to make sure that you know about it. Plasmodium vivax, one of the species of human malaria, can form a stage called a hypnozoite in the human liver. Not every species of human malaria can do this, just Plasmodium vivax. Hypnozoites lay dormant in the liver for years and sometimes even decades. Often people who traveled in the tropics in their youth can live completely normal lives in the temperate zone and then all of a sudden come down with a vivax malaria. A lot of the time they're confused about how that happened. It's because these hypnozoites lie dormant in their liver for years and can reactivate at any time. Okay, so leaving aside the hypnozoites, let's follow our mature liver schizont. The schizont releases all of these baby merozoites who can go on to infect red blood cells, become trophozoites that feed on all the goodies inside of the red blood cell, and then become a schizont that can produce baby merozoites of their very own. That schizont ruptures, releasing all these baby merozoites out into the bloodstream. Now, those merozoites have two options. They can go back and enter another cycle of schizogony, or they can go on to a cycle of gamogony, producing male and female gametocytes. Those gametocytes hang out and wait to be sucked up into a mosquito's proboscis, and once they're there, they can fuse in the mosquito's gut to form a zygote. Let's take a closer look at what goes on inside the mosquito host. The mosquito sucks up the gametes through its proboscis and into its gut, and there they fuse to form a zygote, which develops into an ookinete, the mobile stage. That mobile stage penetrates the gut wall and forms an oocyst, where many sporozoites develop. Those are released into the body cavity of the mosquito, and then they migrate into the salivary glands so that those glands are locked and loaded and ready to be passed into a human host the next time the mosquito bites. That's the Plasmodium life cycle. I'm going to pause here because this being a complex topic, I want you to be able to take a little break before we take a look at what the protozoan life cycle looks like when we get a microscopic view of each of these stages. You might want to go back over this video and pause it to examine the diagrams. There are lots of little details to appreciate about the beautiful complexity of the Plasmodium life cycle. I'll see you in the next video.